Now, if we were not to learn from this, why did Jesus go to such graphic lengths on this issue? We are to study this. We are to know his opinion so much that he gave us extensive characteristics of what to watch for with leaders that are under the law. And the funny thing is, there's so much more. He's only just begun. We're going to take the next chunk and next week finish it. Matthew 23, 16 through 22 says this, "Woe to you, blind guides! You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he's bound by his oath." In other words, if he fails to fulfill his vow, he pays a fine and is off the hook. "You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift on it, he's bound by his oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred?" They were essentially teaching that a promise before God meant nothing. They figured out a way to make money off of broken promises to God. In a nutshell, they were preoccupied with money. 45-minute offerings. I've been subjected to many of those. You want to get God's blessings in your life, give money. Real faith says that you don't take that money to pay the light bill because God's going to keep your electricity on. You put that money in the offering plate and see the miracles of God take place in your life. You know what happens? The freaking lights get shut off. And when they don't, it's because God has mercy, not because they did the right thing. There are so many bleeding, wounded people. I love the parable of the wedding. He sent his servants out to bring in the prestigious people of the community for this wedding, right? Well, they were all too busy, had something going on. Oh, I got an ox out in the field, I need to go get it. Can't make it, sorry. Grab the ones in the gutter. Scrape them off the road. Bring them all in. Well, we've got a lot of brothers and sisters that would never step foot in another institution again because of what it's done to them. Because they see it. They see the truth. They know it's a bunch of BS. There's something new happening. God has decided that I think now is the time to be done with this. And his mercy on the leaders of the law is lifting. And a new thing is beginning to happen. New to us, anyway. We see it on all these YouTube things, you know? What we saw yesterday. Last week. Seems like yesterday. I posted a couple of them when it talks about the Sunday service. Remember that one? Did you guys watch that one on the Sunday service? And, it's just how manipulative it is. Hmm? Yeah, the one who worship, right. This is, when I first started out in worship leading, it was so pure and so innocent. And it was just before it started becoming this great, huge money machine. And all of a sudden, if you had the latest, greatest worship album, you got money. lots of it, and lots of worship leading engagements. You know, I could have aggressively gone down that path and said, I'm here, because I wouldn't do it. Then started coming the seminars, the worship seminars. Send your worship team to this seminar. Send your worship team to that seminar. Have this person come in and do this. Every single one of those outlines was about how to emotionally and strategically manipulate your congregation into an emotional experience, and then let's call it worship. And let's call it intimacy with God. Now, when you go from this song to this song, this is what you want to do. You want to manipulate them. You want to cattle herd them into this phenomenal experience. And I've heard people come out the other end, oh man, God really showed up. It was so amazing. It was so powerful. You know, I was there. I'll tell you what was powerful about it is that, boy, the music was really good. Very polished, very well done. And I chose not to get caught up into an emotional hurricane of manipulation. But as far as having a real encounter with God based on that, no, not really. And so we started the flagship on Levite Ministry, where I started working with worship teams. And wham, was given a platform really off the heels of that. Saying, you know what? It's the long road, not the short road. It's how wine is made, good wine, not cheap stuff. It takes time. But what began happening over the last 20 years is we began generating an addiction in the worship setting because of it. Because it became so strategic to emotionally manipulate people that every Sunday had to be a little bit better than the Sunday before. And it has become this, where it's not just the worship anymore, it's the whole services now are one big, long, emotional manipulation. That was what that one YouTube video was all about. How the whole shooting match now has become one big, long manipulation. So that you walk out the other end feeling like you just went to an awesome show. But are you more intimate and more grounded in the indwelling power of who you are and Christ in you? Did you wake up Monday morning still resonating with the sense of the presence of Jesus in you? More enabled to connect to Him? Or was the next day really cool, and then the next day after that a little less cool, and a little less cool, and a little less cool, and a little less cool, before you had to get your fix again on Sunday? Making sense? The Pharisees minimized and replaced the power and influence of God in a person's life with the power and influence of the religious leaders. That's what they were doing. By saying that your vow to God wasn't nearly as important as your payment to us. They minimized and replaced the power and influence of God in a person's life with the power and influence of the religious leaders. We've got lots of examples today. Let's start with Catholic indulgences. You can buy favors from God by giving us your money. And by the way, they're making a comeback, I heard. Yeah, you heard that too? Trying to keep up with, I guess, the charismatic, worship stuff. I know what we can do. Let's get them indulgences back out, man. They worked in the Middle Ages. They're making a comeback. They don't want you to go straight to Christ because the church doesn't make money that way. Just as with the Pharisees, This minimized and replaced the power and influence of Christ in a person's life with the power and influence of the priests and the church tradition. That's what it did. Guess what? Not confined to Catholics. The prosperity gospel movement has this agenda at its very theological core. All right. We talked about that already. Taking offerings interferes with giving offerings. Think about that. Taking offerings interferes with giving offerings. So our basket's in the back, it's why I make fun of it. Do I want your money? Oh yeah, I want all of it. It would make my life so much easier if I could actually depend on a salary of some nature. But I don't, so I shan't. If we need money, I tell you. Now, tithing is scriptural. The very word tithe means tenth. You can read it for yourself. We all know it's there. It's appropriate. It's to give 10% of your income to God's work. Simple as that. But it's also appropriate to give 10% of your time, 10% of all you are. That's all I ever have to say about it. He finishes up this section by saying, therefore he who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And he who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And he who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it. Don't be deceived. You can pay your little fine to the Pharisees. But let me tell you something, buddy. Strongly suggest you go fulfill your vow. If you're going to make one. Paying some fine does not let you off the hook. Your oath is to God, and it is to God you give an account. And this requires a personal connection to God, right? I have to have a personal capacity for God if I am filling an oath to him. But remember what Jesus said earlier, they block the entrance to that connection. Many of you are sitting here today because of your painful experience with leaders of the law. You can relate to some of these things that are in there. You've been made to focus on your exterior performance for your interior validation. You've been made to see yourself as unworthy of God unless you please him with your proper behavior and actions. And through the tools of guilt and shame, you have been made to believe that God's acceptance of you is conditional, but told that his love is unconditional. How confused ought we to be? And as a result, when you have been unsuccessful in entering into his presence within, you are convinced that it is because you are the failure. That is the fruit of the law. Every stinking bit of it. You have been a victim of the law, just as these leaders themselves are enslaved and blinded by the law they serve. Now, I do believe that there are some leaders who consciously manipulate and abuse people. I believe a lot of them are just blind, like Jesus said. You blind guides, really? Let me see if I can wake you up. Slap, slap, slap. Nope. All right, well then let's speed up the crucifixion. All right. Now, here's the bottom line. Next week, Jesus was just getting warmed up. So next week, we're going to see how he really feels.